Right. Hi, guys. Let's wait for some people to come in. We're going to do some teaching session. This session will probably cost, say, about 20 minutes. And we're continuing with our passages, or rather our series on Matthew 24, which speak about the end days. The last session we did was about false teachers, famines, pestilences, and all that. This is going to be part 2 of that series. You realize part 1, we have done it a few days ago. Now, this session was supposed to be a series of sessions that were supposed to be taught in church. But again, people are not ready for some teachings like this. So what happened was that the session got suspended. So their loss is your gain. We'll be teaching from Matthew 24, and we'll be talking about this thing called the abomination of the desolations. Let me read to you Matthew 24 while people are coming in. When you see me taking my eyes off the screen, that is your screen. I'm actually looking at another screen, which is my notes. And what happens is that it's not that I'm ignoring you. Okay? So let me start. So when you see standing in the holy place the abomination that causes desolation, spoken through the prophet Daniel, let the reader understand. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let no one on the housetop go down to take anything out of the house. Let no one in the field go back to take their cloaks. How dreadful it is will be for those who are pregnant, women and nursing mothers. Hi Lisa, how dreadful it is will be those for pregnant women and nursing mothers. Pray that your flight will not take place in the winter or on the Sabbath, for there will be great distress, unequal from the beginning of the world until now, and never to be equal again. Luke 21, verse 20 to 36 has a mirroring passage, and you will see that you understand that Matthew, Mark, Luke are called the synoptic gospels. So what it simply means is that there are gospels which there are passages which corresponds to each other, and they are basically referring to the same thing. And a parallel passage is actually found in Luke 21 verse 20, and this is what is said in Matthew. When you see standing in the holy place the abomination that causes desolations, spoken through the prophet Daniel, let the reader understand. But this is what is being spoken in Luke. When you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, you will know the desolation is near. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. See, it's the same thing. Let those who are in the city get out, Jerusalem get out. Let those who are in the country not enter into the city. For he said, there is a time of punishment in fulfillment that all that has been written. How dreadful it is will it be for the days of the pregnant women and nursing mothers. See, the same thing. There will be great distress in the land and wrath against this people. They will fall by the swords and will be taken as prisoners to all nations, and Jerusalem will be trampled on by the Gentiles until the time of the Gentiles are fulfilled. Now, when you hear about the abomination that causes desolations, but Christians, most of the Christians today refer it as the abomination of desolations. It's a wrong term to use. It's actually the abomination that causes the desolations. It's not the abomination of the desolations. The abomination itself sounds like a wrestler. It also sounds like one of the characters in Marvel, the universe, the enemy of Hulk. And most of the time today, what we do is that when we see the word abomination, we always think of the Antichrist being one of the American presidents, always, or somebody from Syria. There's a lot of this prophecy that's being thought to say the Antichrist is Assyrian. That's nonsense. But more importantly, let's do a bit of study, okay? Now it says the abomination and causeless, the desolations, as spoken by the prophet Daniel. I want you to look at Daniel chapter 12, verse 1, and this is what it says. At that time, Michael, the great prince that protects your people, will arise. There'll be a time of distress, such as has not happened from the beginning of the nations until then. Until then. But at the time, your people, everyone whose name is found written in the book of life, will be delivered. Now listen to what verse 7 says. The man clothed in linen, who was above the waters of the river, lifted his right hand and his left hand towards heaven. And I heard him swear by him who lives forever, saying, it will be for a time, times, and half a time. That's 3.5 years. It's 1,260 days. When the power of the holy people has finally been broken, all these things will be complete. 1,260? Yes, high cow. I want you to also now turn to Joel chapter 2, verse 2, and it says this. A day of darkness, a day of gloom, a day of clouds and blackness, like a dawn spreading across the mountains, a large and mighty army comes. Notice, a large and mighty army comes, such as never was in ancient times, nor will there be in ages to come. Look at what Daniel says. Daniel says there will be a time of distress such as has never happened before from the beginning of the nations until then. Let's look at what Jesus says. Jesus says this, for then there'll be a great distress unequal from the beginning of the world until now. What is now? Is it 2019? Or is it 80-30? And never will be equal again. And look at what Joel says. Like a dawn spreading across the mountains, a large and mighty army comes, such as never was in ancient times, nor will there be in ages to come. And that's exactly what Jesus said, never to be equal again. But look at the timeline and the setting. It's actually in 80-30. It's not in 2019. As such, what happens that is being spoken by the prophet Daniel is nothing to do with today, but it's something to do with the day of Jesus, or at least the days of Jesus. So, what happened in the days of Jesus is this: the great destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70, 40 years after Jesus prophesied it in Matthew 24. The great destruction of Jerusalem. Now, let me read something very interesting to you. It says this, okay? In Matthew, it says, see, when you see in the holy place, the abomination that causes the desolations. But when you read Luke, and this is what it says, when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, you will see and you will know this desolation is near. Joel tells you, when Jesus said never to be equal again, he was referring to the army. A day of darkness and gloom, a day of clouds and blackness, like dawn spreading across the mountains, a large and mighty army comes, such as never was in ancient times, nor ever will be in the ages to come. And Daniel says that this kind of distress, this period of distress, was until then. And Jesus said the period of distress was until his time. So what army are we talking about? China? Which is what this crazy futurist, literalist people are teaching. China. It's not. The army that Daniel was speaking about, Jesus was speaking about, and Joel was speaking about, was the army in AD 70. It was Rome. was wrong. Now, listen to this. Many people look at this passage and they think it's hell. If your hand causes you to stumble, now this is in Mark 9, okay? Cut it off. It's better for you to enter life maimed with 2 hands to go into hell. Notice the word hell, where the fire never goes out. And if your foot causes you to stumble, cut it off. It's better for you to enter life crippled than to have 2 feet and be thrown into hell. Again, the word hell. And if your eye causes you to stumble, pluck it out. It is better for you to enter the kingdom of God with 1 eye than to have 2 eyes and be thrown into hell, where the worms that eat you do not die and the fires that burn you do not quench. And everyone will be salted with fire. Now, when every time somebody preaches about hell, they always bring out this passage whereby it tells you the lake of burning sulfur will burn you forever and ever and ever. And the worms that eat you will eat you you're alive when it comes to your soul and your spirit, so it will be tormented forever and ever. Now, when it comes to your bodies, the Christians actually say that your bodies actually go to the grave, but your soul will be thrown into hell. It will be tormented forever and ever. Little do people understand, Mark 9 is actually taken from Isaiah 66, verse 24. Listen to this. And they will go out and look at the dead bodies of those who rebel against me, that worms will eat them and will not die, and the fires that burn them will not quench, and there will be an abomination to all mankind. Listen to what he says. They will go out and look at dead bodies. Dead bodies. Dead bodies. Not soul, not spirit. Dead bodies. And if you actually look at this passage is from Isaiah 66 verse 24. If you actually look at Isaiah 66 verse 20, it tells you where this thing will happen. And it's in Jerusalem. It's in Jerusalem. So where are all these dead bodies? In Jerusalem. In Jerusalem. So you also begin to realize the worms that eat them and the fires that burn them do not mean it's forever and ever and ever and ever. It's a figure of speech. When I was in the Philippines, I had dinner with one of my best friends in the world, Paul Hernandez, and we were waiting for dinner, and it took some time. So we said, it's taking forever for the food to come. Now, how long is that forever? 30 minutes. Here, when it tells you the worms that eat them will not die and the fires that burn them will not quench, it's a similar expression of forever. And how long is this forever? Hi, Eleanor. It's only for a short period of 6 months. See? So, who are these people that causes so much death? Who are these people who causes so much desolations? Who caused so much desolations, rather? It was the Roman army. So who is this abomination that causes the desolations? It's the Roman army. Listen to this. Go your way, Daniel. Daniel 12, verse 9. Daniel 12, verse 9. Hi, Flora. Because the words are rolled up and sealed up until the time of the end. It doesn't say end of time. It says time of the end. Do you know when the seals were opened? It's Revelation 6. The seals were opened by who? The lamb that had just been slain. When was the lamb slain? On the cross. So when were these seals opened? At the cross. Now, in fact, Hebrews 9:26, if you read it in the King James Version, it says the end of the world was when Jesus Christ appeared to take away sins. So the end of the world actually began on the cross. The reason is because Jesus was the last Adam, and he brought the Adamic world to an end. And when he was raised as the new man, the man from heaven. And so the new creation began at the resurrection, not at the time when you believe in Jesus. So listen to this. Many will be purified, made spotless, and refined, but the wicked will continue to be wicked. None of the wicked will understand, but those who are wise will understand. Look, let's look at verse 11. From that time, the daily sacrifice is abolished, and the abomination that causes desolation is set up, and it's for 1,290 days. Just now, we are told it's for 70, 1,260 days. And the reason for this is because it takes 1 month for the soldiers to march from Rome all the way to Jerusalem. So there's another additional 30 days, which makes up 1,290 days. So, let's read this. Because many people are still not convinced it's the Roman army. And like Carl said, how in the world did we get the China army? That's because people interpret Revelation as of today. But the timeline is very clear. It's established by Daniel, it's established by Joel. It is during the time of Jesus. And listen to this. Revelation 12. And a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, moon, under her feet, and a crown of 12 stars on her head. Now, people say this passage refers to the constellations of Virgo, and this prophecy actually happens 400 times in a year, where the sun is above the constellation Virgo, the moon under her feet, and 12 stars on her head. And they're talking about, these 12 constellations that are on her head. Listen to this. She was pregnant, she cried out in pain as she was about to give birth. Then another sign appeared in heaven, an enormous red dragon with 7 heads, remember, 7 heads, 10 horns, and 7 crowns on his head. It swept 1/3 of the stars out from the sky and flung them to the earth. Now, this is the passage of scripture where the Roman Catholics teach you to say that basically at the end of the day, this 1/3 of the stars are 1/3 of the angels. And so they've been swept down by Satan, and this 1/3 of these angels become demons to haunt you. Hi, Chloe. So nice to see you. Its tail swept 1/3 of the stars out of the skies and flung them to the earth. The dragon stood in front of the woman who was about to give birth so that it may devour her child the moment it was born. She gave birth to a son, a male child, who will rule the nations with an iron scepter. And the child was snatched up to God. And the woman fled into the wilderness to a place prepared for her by God, that she may be taken for how long? 1,260 days. 3.5 years. Where did Jesus ask the people of Israel to go to? Judea, the hills in Judea. So where was this woman led to for 1,260 days? Judea. And who is this woman? You see, when you talk about the sun, moon, and stars, it's not a literal sun, moon, and stars. The reason is very simple. Can you imagine when Jesus said the sun will turn black and the moon will turn red and the stars will fall from heaven? Could you imagine if the sun were to actually move 1 centimeter closer to you, you'll all be burned to death. And if the sun actually departs from us by 1 centimeter, we'll all freeze to death as well. If the moon actually turns to red, we will all be floating in the skies because the moon is responsible for our gravitational position. If a star were to fall down from heaven, and the nearest star that we have is actually the sun, what's the point of going to the hills of Judea? We'll be dead. Because the sun is is bigger than us a zillion times. So is Jesus being literal here? No. Remember Joseph. He had a dream where the sun bowed down to him, the moon bowed down to him, and the 11 stars bowed down to him. They were his parents and his brothers. And that family is called the family of Jacob. Today, that family has increased tremendously and is called the house of Israel. So who's the sun, moon, and stars? It's Israel. So when you are talking about the woman being actually taken away placed into a place of safety for 1,260 days. That 1,260 days was the siege of Jerusalem by the Gentiles. It's also known as the time of the Gentiles. So in other words, what happens is that these people who were taken to Judea were kept safe there. And this, my dear friend, is the early church. It was called out from Israel. See, 1,260 days. 1,260 days. And this is exactly what Daniel said. 1,260 days. It appears in Daniel. It appears in Revelation. And so what happens is that it also appears from the very words of Jesus. Hi, Carol. Now, listen to this. Who is this incredible serpent? Who is this incredible serpent? Let me tell you. Okay? It has 7 heads and 7 crowns. And Revelation 17, if I'm not mistaken, tells you there were 7 kings. Those 7 heads represent 7 kings, and represent 7 hills, and those 7 crowns represent 7 kings. There's only one place in the whole of the ancient world that has 7 hills. It's Rome. And if you look at Rome at that time, it had 7 kings from the Julio-Claudian line. The Julio-Claudian line, or the Julio-Claudian line, it depends how you pronounce it, starts off with Julius Caesar. And then after that, it continues with Augustus, Tiberius, Caligula, Claudius, and Nero, and then finally Galba. 7 kings. 7 hills. And then what happened was that when they also prophesied that out of the 6th king will come 2 horns. And if you understand, what happened was that Galba, who was the 7th king, was killed, and they have the year of the 4 emperors. And this is when Rome became in such chaotic form that the Senate, which is being represented by 10 provinces, see, 10 horns, chose to replace the Julio-Claudian line with Vespasian and his son, Titus, the 2 horns. And this is another line. So, when you read about the fatal wound that one of the heads of the beast had, and it was resurrected by these 2 horns, it simply means the Roman army or the Roman Empire was about to be destroyed because Nero died. Galba was a useless king. He only ruled for 6 months. And so, these 2 horns that resurrected one of the heads of the serpent was actually Vespasian and Titus. Now, how did they resurrect the 6th king, or the 6th head of the beast? Because they carried out the mission that was granted to them by Nero, which was to destroy Jerusalem. So who's the abomination that causes the desolations? It's not an antichrist who will walk into the temple rebuilt by Christians and to declare himself God. It's not that creature. It's actually Rome. That is the abomination that causes the desolations. So how many passages are given to you? I've given to you about 7 passages in the last 20 minutes. Now, a lot of people come and tell you that, ADC Sarin teaching is not correct and blah, 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 and all that. And how many passages do they give you? They give you passages and passages which are taken totally out of context, which are taken totally out of audience relevance, which are totally taken out of the whole counsel of the scriptures. Now, why I want to tell you all these things is because, look, let's live our lives as people who are resurrected rather than people who are waiting for a resurrection. The abomination that causes desolations is in the past. It's not something that will be revived. Some people even say stupid things like there will be a resurrection of the Roman Empire, and that takes the form of the EEC. Guys, we all know, basically at the end of the day, EEC now consists of more than 10 members. I think it's about 17. And England is trying to pull out, so is Germany, so is Italy. How long is that going to last? Does it fit within the timeline of what is being spoken in Daniel? What is being spoken in Matthew? What is being spoken in Revelation? It's not. In fact, 1,260 days is 3.5 years. And that's the attack that Titus had against Jerusalem. 3.5 years. That's when Jerusalem fell. This is when Isaiah 66 verse 24 comes to fruition. And they will see the dead bodies of those who rebel against me, where the worms that eat them do not die, and the fires that burn them do not quench. Because it took more than 6 months to actually get rid of all the bodies that died in Jerusalem. So when you see this verse that say 1/3 of the stars fell down from heaven, I'm going to tell you something which is going to blow your mind. It's not about demons. The 1/3 of the stars that were slain, that were swept by the tail of the dragon, were Jews that were killed in this Jewish war. You can read about the Jewish war in Josephus, called The History of the Jews and Antiquities. You can also go to YouTube under the BBC channel and go through a documentary called The Jewish Wars. And you'll see all these things happening. And that is what the abomination of desolations is. I hope, guys, this simple video enlighten you before we do our part 3, which is coming in the clouds. Yeah, Matthew 24 coming in the clouds. And what that means, I've chosen to kind of like break down the whole teaching session to 6 episodes, so that we take snippets and we don't give you too much, so that you can chew on whatever that has been told to you, and for you to actually share it with your friends. So God bless. It's almost 11 o'clock in Malaysian time. It's time for me to sleep because tomorrow I'll be in court. I do request that you guys pray for me, because apparently what happened is that my hemoglobin platelets have gone down from 12 to 10.6. My doctors are a bit concerned because it seems that I am bleeding somewhere internally. And of course they are fearful that there's a resurrection of the tumor. But I don't think that's the truth, partly because I just finished my chemotherapy. So even if there is a resurgence of the tumor, it won't be so quick. I'm going for a scope on the 28th. I'll let you know whether there's any, what the results are. So in the meantime, appreciate your prayers, and I'll probably see you in 2 days' time, and we'll talk about the coming in the clouds. Meanwhile, pray for my health, and pray that my red blood cells platelets will go up. Yeah. So, cheers.